Today I would like to discuss the psychology of heroism and collective illusion in modern political leadership through the lens of my books, Illusion of Cultural Hero and Steve Jobs' Oedipus Journey, as well as the ideas of Ernest Becker. In particular, I will use Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu as case studies to critically examine why modern politics repeatedly descends into conflict, division, war, and collective anxiety from ontological, psychological, and philosophical perspectives. First, I would like to emphasize an important point. This lecture is not intended to condemn any nation or its people as a whole. Rather, it is an attempt to understand why human beings are repeatedly drawn to strong leaders and collective heroism, and why even democratic societies can fall into states of collective irrationality. Ernest Becker argued that humanity's most fundamental fear is the fear of death. Human beings know that their existence is finite, and precisely because of this awareness, they live with constant anxiety. Economic anxiety, social anxiety, national insecurity, fear of war, fear of decline. When people feel that their existence is threatened, they become more inclined to seek powerful leaders. This is because they perceive in such leaders the possibility of stability, security, and even symbolic immortality for their group. In my view, the most dangerous moment in modern politics occurs when citizens excessively project their fears and insecurities onto a particular leader. Donald Trump is a figure who strongly stimulated the anxieties and frustrations present within American society. Economic insecurity caused by globalization, distrust of established institutions, cultural division, and feelings of relative deprivation. Many people hoped that a strong and direct leader could relieve their existential unease. Make America great again. This is not merely a political slogan. It is a collective immortality illusion. When citizens feel that their nation is great, they often feel that their own existence becomes more meaningful and secure. Benjamin Netanyahu can also be understood within a powerful framework of collective heroism. Israeli society carries a long history of persecution and existential insecurity. Under conditions of war and the constant threat of terrorism, people naturally desire strong leaders who promise security, and leaders, in turn, often gain greater power through these collective anxieties. The problem begins here. When a leader's desire for power combines with collective insecurity, society can gradually move toward extreme forms of heroism and hostility. The central argument I emphasize in cultural immortality illusion is this: human beings attempt to defend themselves against the fear of death by identifying with the permanence and superiority of their group. The same principle applies to nations. Our nation is special. Our people are great. We must survive at all costs. To some degree, such sentiments are natural. The problem arises when they become absolute. At that moment, other groups cease to be seen as fellow human beings and begin to appear primarily as threats. Political leaders can then use these fears to strengthen their own authority. In modern politics, charisma is often not created solely by a leader's actual abilities. It emerges from a combination of public anxiety and collective hope projected onto the leader. People search for a hero who can solve their problems. He will save us. He will make us strong again. Yet this is precisely where democracy becomes vulnerable. Citizens begin to admire leaders not critically, but almost as saviors. I believe this is one of the most dangerous dynamics in contemporary politics. Strong leaders often begin to identify themselves with the nation itself. They come to believe that their personal power is inseparable from the nation's destiny. Opponents are no longer viewed as political competitors, but as enemies threatening the nation. This is where democracy begins to weaken. Democracy was originally designed as a system for continuously checking and balancing power. However, as hero-centered politics intensifies, citizens are encouraged to demonstrate loyalty rather than criticism. This tendency becomes even more extreme during times of war. War magnifies collective fear, and fearful populations often seek even stronger leaders. But who ultimately bears the greatest sacrifice? Usually the powerless, ordinary citizens, young soldiers, the poor. Leaders speak of glory and national destiny, but it is the people who suffer and die. I believe that behind many wars throughout human history lies a collective immortality illusion. Psychologically, this resembles a structure of collective narcissism. People become convinced that their own group is absolutely good, while defining others as evil. We are righteous. They are dangerous. We must prevail. Such narratives make war easier to justify, and political leaders can exploit these emotions to consolidate power. Of course, real-world politics and international relations are complex. National security concerns and genuine threats do exist. Nevertheless, I believe we must ask an essential question. Are a leader's decisions truly intended to promote the welfare and peace of the people? Or are they partly driven by a desire to strengthen the leader's own historical legacy and heroic image? This is a question that every democracy must continually ask. Sigmund Freud argued that human beings possess both eros and aggressive instincts. Eros is the drive to expand and preserve life. Nations behave similarly. They seek greater strength, greater influence, greater expansion of their own order and values. The danger is that aggression and domination can become justified. In the process, I believe that one of the most important responsibilities within a democratic society is maintaining a civic consciousness that refuses to absolutize political leaders. Leaders are human beings. They are not perfect saviors. Citizens must not blindly project their fears and hopes onto them. The moment this happens, democracy begins to be governed by collective psychology and emotional politics rather than rational deliberation. This is why I have consistently emphasized self-reflection in my writings. Human beings must confront their own fears of death and insecurity. Only then can they avoid being easily swept away by powerful rhetoric and collective heroism. We must continually ask, is this leader truly serving the community? Or is this leader primarily strengthening his own heroic image? Why do we long so intensely for strong leaders? The essence of democracy is not merely voting. It is the civic spirit of continually questioning and checking power. It is the refusal to idolize leaders. It is the ability to view other groups and nations without reducing them to simplistic categories of absolute good and evil. From a philosophical perspective, human beings struggle to endure their own finitude. Therefore, they seek permanence and security through powerful nations and powerful leaders. From a psychological perspective, citizens project their anxieties onto charismatic figures. And from an ontological perspective, human civilization itself may be understood as a vast, heroic system, constructed to cope with the fear of death. Yet I believe that once people understand this structure, they can move toward a more mature form of democracy. We should not worship leaders as gods. We should continuously question, scrutinize, and hold them accountable. Most importantly, we must recognize that people in different nations and cultures ultimately share the same fears, vulnerabilities, and existential anxieties. Therefore, I would like to conclude with this thought. The tragedies of human history do not arise solely because of bad leaders. More often, collective madness grows when people elevate leaders into absolute heroes in response to their own fears and insecurities. The true strength of democracy lies not in powerful leaders, but in citizens who can think critically and reflect deeply, and perhaps the path toward a more peaceful world begins with understanding one another's fears and finitude, while viewing power and heroism with wisdom, humility, and clear-eyed reflection.